make it all in English so that it is fast and you get the opportunity to pose more questions. I will skip the background. I'm sure everybody knows from the press release that invited you here. So you know that we are going to have the opportunity to have with us the President of the Chairman of the PEGA Committee and the Rapporteur of the PEGA Committee. They are with us here. And we can already start. I think we will start with a statement by the Chairman.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Good morning to all of you present here, and it's good to see there's so much interest in the work of our committee in the European Parliament. Now, maybe just as a brief introduction, our committee, the PEGA committee, is a committee of inquiry which was established in the European Parliament to look into the abuse of Pegasus and equivalent spyware in the European Union. So we don't focus as much on individual member states, but we look at the European Union as a whole, and through hearings, through studies, and to country visits, like we have now just concluded in Cyprus and Greece, we try to deepen our knowledge and improve our understanding of the situation, which will then feed into the report, which will be drafted by my colleague Sophie Innetveld, who will also take the floor after me. So this is what we do. Our delegation to Cyprus and Greece, we consisted of 10 members of the European Parliament, representing 5 different political groups and 7 different member states. So we truly look at this from a European perspective. Most of the colleagues are with us here in the room, so they are also available for any questions after the press conference on an individual basis, should there be an interest. Now, before I go into the conclusions of our mission and our statement, let me also take the opportunity to thank the European Parliament Liaison Office, Mr. Tsoutsouplidis in particular, for their hospitality in hosting us here in Athens and being able to host many of our meetings here, which was very appreciated. Now, between the 1st and the 4th of November, our committee went on its 3rd fact-finding mission. During the 4 days we spent in Cyprus and Greece, we met with multiple government representatives, members of parliaments, civil society representatives, journalists and victims. We appreciate that government representatives also took the time to meet with us and shared relevant information. We learned a lot, but we also still feel that many of our questions remain to be answered. During our meetings, we learned more about high-profile surveillance cases, for example, involving the journalist Tanas Koukakis, MP Christos Pirtsis. And in these cases, many of the interlocutors we spoke to believe that national security has been used as a justification for spyware abuse and surveillance. We've met with many journalists and civil society representatives who are trying to shed light on the web of connections between various spyware companies and their alleged links also to the state. Any allegations of abuse of surveillance have to be thoroughly investigated, and necessary safeguards should be installed. The Hellenic Parliament did establish an inquiry committee to probe illicit surveillance of the leader of the opposition party, PASOK, Mr. Nikos Androulakis, and we met with 4 of the parties that were represented on the committee, but we think that its investigation did uncover only few facts and did not hear from all the relevant witnesses. We were surprised. As a committee, we are working towards one joint report from the European Parliament. We were surprised to learn that political parties here adopted their own separate reports rather than a joint one, and we also consider that the final committee report should be made public both for the benefit of society as for the benefit also of other actors. Citizens of Greece and Cyprus deserve to benefit from the implementation of EU laws that protect their fundamental freedoms and rights. Anti-corruption mechanism, anti-money laundering laws and data protection and dual-use regulations have to be properly implemented and applied. And this is important for those countries, but also for the European Union as a whole. Now, both the governments of Cyprus and Greece shared proposals for reforms that could bolster the fundamental rights of the citizens of Cyprus, Greece and the EU as a whole, and to protect them against abuse of surveillance. For example, the government of Greece informed us about its plan to ban the use of spyware by private entities. Now, the objective of the reforms should always be to improve transparency and enforcement of applicable laws. The authorities should ensure proper democratic oversight over law enforcement, and citizens should be given access to effective legal remedies. National security should go hand in hand with fundamental rights. Also, we need a robust legal framework guaranteeing a healthy, pluralist media environment everywhere in the EU. This is the statement on behalf of the Commission, of the delegation that visited Cyprus and Greece, because I want to also underline it's both Cyprus and Greece that we conclude our mission here today. And having said that, I would like to pass the floor to our rapporteur, Sophie In'Veld, for her comments.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I would like to express gratitude to all the people that were willing to meet with us in the last couple of days in Cyprus and Greece. But I would also like to express gratitude to the Pegasus Project and to all the journalists and NGOs which have been very diligently and courageously digging for the truth. And not always with public support, because what's at stake here is not just the privacy of individuals, but our democracy and our free society as a whole. I would like to say a little bit more about the findings, and let me start by saying, have we found definitive, ultimate proof of who used Predator and why? No, we have not, and we will not find that proof as long as the authorities are not willing to share official information with us. So, we will have to deduct as much as we can from the context and the elements that we know so far, because we may not have all the pieces of the puzzle, but we have many, and the image is becoming clear. Predator has been used on targets in Greece, including on journalists and politicians. Some of those have also been the target of official surveillance by the EYP. But who is using Predator? We hear all kinds of wild speculation, most of which is utter nonsense. So I will discard those scenarios. There are basically two scenarios that are possible. One is it is Intellexa itself, for whatever reason, and the other one is that it was done by the government or actors in government circles. The question is then, who chose the targets and why? In detective terms, who had the motive, the means, and the opportunity? So let's first look at the victims that we know so far. People is very noisy. Listen to the teacher here. So let's look at the victims that we know so far and the possible motives for targeting them. First, journalist Koukakis, who is a real nuisance to the powers that be, as journalists are supposed to be. He writes about corruption and tax evasion, specifically the gentlemen Bitsios and Lavranos, and he also wrote about controversial new laws on, among other things, the banking sector. Then there's journalist Teloglu, who mercilessly exposes the spyware scandal. Malichoudis, another journalist who writes in international media about the treatment of migrants in Greece. Then we have a politician, Mr. Androulakis, who was, at the time that he was targeted, candidate for the PASOK leadership, and from the four candidates, I believe, the one who publicly declared that he would not support a coalition government led by Mr. Mitsotakis as Prime Minister. And then a recent case, or recent revelation, Mr. Spirtsis, who is close to Mr. Tsipras, and who is also present during key meetings with the party leadership and third parties, so between the party leadership and third parties. So you can see, if I may paraphrase a movie title, 4 threats and an opportunity for the government party. Now, cui bono, as they say, who benefits? So let's look at some of the protagonists of the story. We've heard about Mr. Dimitriadis, Mr. Bitsios, and Mr. Lavranos, who all three have close business and personal connections. We've heard about Mr. Kondolion, the former EYP chief, who is also, by his own admission, socially acquainted with Mr. Dimitriadis. Then there's Mr. Bitsios and Lavranos, who benefited themselves from a new law from 2019 on freezing orders introduced by the new government, with the results that their frozen assets were released. Mr. Bitsios is also, or was until recently, 1/3 owner and manager at Intellexa, close to Tal Dilian and Mr. Stanislav Peltsar, former legal representative of Krikel. All three are also connected to Malta. Mr. Lavranos, who is most probably the ultimate beneficial owner of Krikel and has benefited, therefore, from the government contracts. Mr. Dimitriadis, who is also reportedly closely acquainted with Mr. Loverdos, who was formerly a minister, but who was also one of the candidates for the PASOK leadership, and he had been part of a former Nea Demokratia PASOK coalition. Now, as to means and opportunity, first of all, in 2019, the EYP was brought under the exclusive oversight of the Prime Minister, and Mr. Dimitriadis was responsible for it in his office. Then Mr. Kondolian was appointed by the new government, and that required a small change to the law, the statute. There was also a new head of the National Transparency Authority that was appointed. And at that time, the previous government had actually abolished the true prosecutor authorization of surveillance requests. So that means that until the very recent change in law, that there was one prosecutor who was responsible for approving approximately 60 requests a day without knowing who the target was or what the reasons was for that person to be put under surveillance. I would call that not a meaningful judicial oversight, but a rubber stamping exercise. When the ADAE concluded that Mr. Koukakis had the right to be informed of the surveillance that he had been under, the government abolished the right of targets to be informed more quickly than I can say kratiki asfalia. National security is invoked to conceal the reasons for surveillance of Koukakis, Androulakis and others. A parliamentary inquiry was set up, as you know, but the government majority blocked the testimony of key figures such as Dimitriadis, Bitsios and Lavranos, who, by the way, also failed to answer to the invitation of this PEGA committee, and the conclusions and minutes will remain classified. The EYP files of Koukakis and Androulakis have very unfortunately accidentally been destroyed. There has been an investigation by the National Transparency Authority, but that was 2 months after the complaint of Mr. Koukakis, and what they did is they visited the premises of Intellexa in Krikel one time. I think they investigated 1 year of the annual accounts of the companies. They didn't investigate the subsidiaries. They didn't confiscate any servers or computers or administration. So I would call that a very superficial investigation. Skipping a few points here.